All right, so we've talked about filter context and we've talked about how measures evaluate based on that filter context. But it's time to take a peek under the hood and try to learn about how the actual engine works. How are these specific measure calculations actually happening? Let's consider a very simple matrix view like this. In this case, we're evaluating a quantity sold measure based on product color. And what we want to figure out is how does this particular cell, where color equals black, how is that calculated and returning a number of 10,590? So, what I'm about to show you all happens behind the scenes and it happens instantly every time the filter context changes. So, I like to think of this as a three-step process, where step one is when the filter context is detected and applied. So this is where Power BI looks at the filter context for that particular value and says, okay, I'm being asked to only care about rows where the product color in my product table equals black. And as a result, the product table then gets filtered down to the point where you're only left with rows where the product color equals black. And from there, we move into step two, which is where that filter context of product color equals black flows downstream to all of the related tables, right? If you think back to that data modeling section, right, you've got all of your one-to-many relationships, look up to data tables. That's why those relationships are so important. So if you had a model like this, where the product table was connected to two data tables, sales and returns, you would see both of those data tables filter down accordingly to only the product IDs where the product color equals black. So you would basically end up with a filtered down version of both of those data tables. And that brings us to step three, which is when the measure formula actually evaluates against the filtered table. So the measure that we're looking at here, what it's essentially doing is summing all of the values in the order quantity column within the sales data table, but not the whole sales data table. It's only summing the rows of the filtered down version where the product color is black. And as a result, the sum of quantities sold, it's based on the number of rows that exist after that filter context has been applied, right? And that's where you derive that 10,590 from. So hopefully that makes sense and you're starting to think about and really kind of understand why all of the work that we've done up until this point, like properly cleaning our data and creating proper table relationships, are really vital when starting to write DAX. One other thing that I can't stress enough is that really understanding the basics that we've covered so far, like row and filter context and measure evaluation, just how critical they are to starting to get comfortable with DAX and really understanding how it's working. So I'd recommend keeping this slide on hand just as a helpful reference in those cases where you might not be able to figure out exactly how your measure is calculating, or if it's not returning the value that you'd expect. That kind of wraps up this high level kind of conceptual part of the section of this course. From here, we're going to move into DAX syntax, operators, common function categories, and then we're really going to get our hands dirty with a bunch of different examples.